Hi, everybody. Welcome to our Wednesday night reading of the book of Genesis. We're moving quite quickly through the book of Genesis, but I'm trusting that you're going to be able to read the entire chapters on your own. And if you have any questions, I would encourage you or if you have anything you would like to discuss, I would encourage you to email me at Side-Windsor, coc@gmail.com, or you can phone me at 519 995 4189, and I'd be happy to talk with you. The book of Genesis is filled with a lot of the great stories that we've heard about for so long in our lives, and we've told and retold in church. And so I just am trusting that you're going to be able to read it. And I just enjoy reading the book of Genesis, but we're just kind of highlighting different aspects as we read through. And so we got through the flood basically, and we're almost near the end of Noah's story, where we're going to pick it up tonight in Genesis chapter 9. And we're going to read portions of chapter 9, just one verse of chapter 10, and then a portion of chapter 11, two portions of chapter 9, two portions of chapter 11, and one little verse of chapter 10. So chapter 9, of course, it's the end of the flood story. God has rescued Noah, has provided for Noah and his family, and they have found the other side. And now that they have found the other side, we notice that God starts repeating some of the earlier blessings that he had given to Adam and Eve. He now repeats to Noah himself. And so God has not given up on the human project. God has not given up on the world project, even though it seemed like he was going to just before the flood. So let's pick it up. We're going to read the first 7 verses of chapter 9. And it begins, "And God blessed Noah and his sons and said to them, Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. The fear of you and the dread of you shall be upon every beast of the earth and upon every bird of the heavens, upon everything that creeps on the ground, and all the fish of the sea. Into your hand they are delivered. Every moving thing that lives shall be food for you. And as I gave you the green plants, I give you everything. But you shall not eat flesh with its life, that is, its blood. And for your lifeblood I will require a reckoning. From every beast I will require it, and from man. From his fellow man I will require a reckoning for the life of man. Whoever sheds the blood of man, by man shall his blood be shed, for God made man in his own image. And you, be fruitful and multiply, teem on the earth and multiply in it." So you get a picture here of where God wants this to go. And remember, before the flood, if you recall, every intent of man's heart was evil. And we get a little glimpse here now where God is describing that the one thing he does not want to happen is man taking the blood of another man. Right? Does not want this occurring among humankind. That our intention should not be death or murder. And even if you think about this, there's something wrong, whether it's with them or with us, but there's something wrong when there's a feeling, I would love to hurt you, right? There's something wrong with that, or I would want to hurt you. In any way, there's something not right about that. And we can justify it, and we can try to excuse it, but there's just something not right with it. And so you'll notice that God asks humankind, through Noah and his sons, to be fruitful and multiply in the earth, not to remove another person from the earth. And so that's important. The other thing you'll notice is there's a change in the relationship between men and animals. Previously, God had given men all the green plants to eat, and now he has given him every moving thing. And this is what's kind of interesting about this as well, is this is entirely different from the law of Moses. Remember, the law of Moses, the Jews in covenant were not allowed to eat of every living thing, but Noah and his family are told they can. So that's just an important aspect there, because it plays a big part in the New Testament with Jesus. So they have now discovered life on earth again, and the covenant is being renewed, and God, of course, gave the rainbow and other things like that. All right. So then we get to a next section, and verse 20 through 24 is the shame of Ham. Now, we must be careful not to read into these chapters of Genesis what Moses himself has not spoken. And people did this in the 1800s, in the 1900s, to justify racial categories and a hierarchy among racial categories. And this is really significant here is because the Bible does not really talk about racial categories. It will talk about different nationalities. It will talk about different religions. It will talk about different ethnicities, but it will not talk about different races. So we have to be very careful here. The shame of Ham, which is on his descendant Canaan, is on the Canaanites, not any other people that we might want to justify a mistreatment of today. So just pick this up. But we do notice what Ham does, why the Canaanites are looked at with such disdain in Israelite view. Beginning at verse 20, it says, Noah began to be a man of the soil, and he planted a vineyard. So he was like Cain, remember? So it wasn't really Cain's profession that was wrong in God's eyes, it was Cain's heart. But this is where Noah's story gets a little bit, he drank of the wine and became drunk and lay uncovered in his tent. So he was naked in his tent. And so remember, Adam and Eve they were naked and unashamed. But once sin entered the picture, they recognized their nakedness and God covered them up, right? So now Noah is drunk and he's uncovered in his tent. This is a scene of shame. It says in verse 22, and Ham, the father of Canaan, so Moses is already alerting us to Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father and told his two brothers outside. Shem and Japheth took a garment, laid it on both their shoulders, and walked backwards and covered the nakedness of their father. Their faces were turned backward. They did not see their father's nakedness. When Noah awoke from his wine and knew what his youngest son had done to him. And this is where the cursing comes. And so we just notice the difference here between those who recognize the shame and those who do not. Chapter 10, I just want to read verse 1. It talks about all the different nations there, the dividing of Noah's three sons into different nations. It just says, and remember we talked about this, how the Old Testament, but specifically Genesis, is divided into sections. These are the generations of the sons of Noah. Not of Noah, but of the sons of Noah. Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Sons were born to them after the flood. And so now we have this expansion of people groups in the world, of nations. And that leads us to chapter 11. And there's two things about chapter 11 that are important in, or at least are noteworthy in our knowledge of the scriptures. Is number one is the Tower of Babel. And number two is the introduction of the great man Abraham, although at first he's known as Abram. So we'll read chapter 11, verses 1 through 9. Now the whole earth had one language and the same words. And as people migrated from the east, they found a plain in the land of Shinar and settled there. And they said to one another, come, let us make bricks and burn them thoroughly. And they had brick for stone and bitumen for mortar. Then they said, come, let us. So similar to what God did as the creator, come, let us make man in our own image. Humankind now says, come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower with its top in the heavens, and let us make a name for ourselves. So this is what they want to do, is they want to make a name for themselves. And we're going to remember this next week compared to God's actions through Abraham. Let us make a name for ourselves. Human pride is one of the great vices of human nature. Lest we be dispersed over the face of the whole earth. And the Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the children of man had built. And the Lord said, behold, they are one people, they have all one language, and this is only the beginning of what they will do. And nothing that they propose to do will now be impossible for them. Come, he says, let us go down, and it's reversed now, let us go down, and there confuse their language, so that they may not understand one another's speech. So the Lord dispersed them from there over the face of all the earth, and they left off building the city. Therefore its name was called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of all the earth, and from there the Lord dispersed them over the face of all the earth. So here again we see that God has an issue with humanity. And in Noah's day, he called upon a flood. But now he doesn't bring a flood, but he also hasn't given them up yet. We're going to see that in chapter 12. God hasn't given them up yet, but what he's doing is thwarting their evil plan here. He doesn't want this to happen. There's something wrong with humankind. Now, the curse of Babel will be reversed centuries and centuries and generations later, and we see that in the book of Acts. When after Jesus has risen from the dead and the Holy Spirit comes down, people understand despite speaking different languages. So anyways, that's reversed in Acts chapter 2, verses 5 through 11. But we just notice here what is happening. Humankind's pride and God's decision that it's necessary to ensure that they don't keep going this way. And so the last section, and this leads us to Abraham. Abraham's father is named Terah. And so it says in verse 31, the last two verses of chapter 11, I just want to end with this. Terah took Abram his son and Lot the son of Haran, his grandson, and Sarai his daughter-in-law, his son Abram's wife, and they went forth together from Ur of the Chaldeans to go into the land of Canaan. But when they came to Haran, they settled there. The days of Terah were 205 years, and Terah died in Haran. Now, the only thing I just want to point out here is we know in chapter 12 that Abram is the one who's called into Canaan's land. But just notice for a moment, this is the first stage of the journey, which is about 550 miles. But just notice that for some reason, Abram's father had purposed to go to Canaan's land. There was something about in Abram's father, and we don't really know why. We're not told why Terah felt the need to go to Canaan's land. But it's interesting, did Abram tell Terah that he was being called by God? Or did God himself say, Terah, please go to the land of Canaan, and then whatever happened is Terah decides not to go, and he settles in Haran. And someone just simply said, whether this is applying to Terah or not, Haran might be the land of comfort. And so they settled there. But Canaan was the land of promise. And it's by faith that Abram goes to the land of promise. And so we'll pick it up next week. God bless everyone.